Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Singleton, and I am the Director of Student Services for Special Education. I have been in education for 21 years. I started as a para, so I was excited to see so many paras in the audience. From a para, I became a teacher. I taught grades, throughout my teaching career, I taught grades K to 8. I was also a teacher leader, a teacher mentor, a staff developer in the middle school, and I was also a reading coach for the district. I was an instructional support specialist for special education, and I was the operations manager at the Queens ISC, and now I am the Director of Student Services for Special Education. So what really connected me to education was I was one of those students where, I felt that the administrators and the teachers really didn't understand me. So I consider it to be misunderstood minds. And growing up, by the time I got to middle school, I was suspended 13 times. I was kicked out of 4 high schools. And my mother had to actually advocate for me to get me back, because by this time they didn't even want me attending the New York City public schools. They actually wanted to send me to a 600 school. And so my mom, she had to fight to get me back into school. But a lot of my misbehaviors was because I was actually bored in class. And so I wanted to make it fun. So I would do silly things, like when the teacher turned her back, I would open up the window, maybe throw a snowball, just doing silly things. But there was a few teachers actually and an AP that actually took time to talk with me. Sometimes they would meet me and ask me how my day was going, and they would actually talk to me about what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and another teacher would actually use me in a leadership capacity. And I think I heard one of the young ladies said that they had a child in their class that was, causing a lot of havoc in there. And so, being on the peer mediation, that student was able to turn around his behavior because the teacher started using him in a leadership capacity. And so that's what brought me into education, because I wanted to actually work with students who most teachers or most educators would consider to be very challenging. Those students that make you say, he's here today. So actually when I started teaching, I used to say, give them to me. And, it was just so amazing to see the progress, the way they turned around their behavior. And even in life now, I keep in contact with so many of them. And so teaching is near and dear to my heart. And so one of the things that we do in our network, which is how I met Celia, was I work with 30 schools. So each one of my schools had to participate in one of the projects. And then what we did was we developed lab sites where we would go and we would visit the other teacher in practice, and we would have cool and warm feedback so that they're growing, we're growing as administrators, and then the children are actually benefiting from it, because now we're able to implement those strategies that they need in order to be able to exceed and excel academically, because that's why we're all here, because that's what we want for them. And so I say this year, one of the things we noticed, because we tried to continue that and keep our partnership going with Teachers College for the TCIP program, is we noticed that we actually reduced the referral rate to special education. We increased the decertification rate to special education. And many of our children are actually performing really, really well. When we looked at the data last year for the Common Core, many of our students actually scored 3s and 4s. And so, again, that comes from teachers learning from each other. We include our paras. When I leave here today, I'm going to conduct a para PD. And so we make sure our paras are trained, and, we make sure that we're working with teachers and that they have the opportunity to see best practices. And for me, education has always been near and dear to my heart. Because for me, if my mom had given up on me, or if the teacher or the AP or public advocate had given up on me, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And so it was actually a public advocate in the community that actually recommended me to become a paraprofessional because I was doing so much work, like in a Boys and Girls Club, putting things together and working with kids. And so when she recommended me to become a paraprofessional, and they told me that I would be working with children who had challenging behavior, because back then they used to coin the classes, Ms. 1, Ms. 2, Ms. 3. So they were placing me in the Ms. 2 class, which was a classroom that was filled with little boys that had some behavioral problems. And then it was there that I worked closely with the teacher. The teacher took me under her wings, and we started to implement a lot of activities. So instead of our activities being, just dry and, copy this from the board or read this or complete that, we actually started turning them into actual activities where the children could actually work in groups to complete tasks. And this is back then when you actually sat in rows. We started putting on shows, allowing the kids to actually act out, the reading lessons, just to help them, let's say, remember. Most of the kids, though, that were in the Ms. 2 class, actually academically could do really well. Like Stephen said, he was one of those great readers. So it was just a matter of teaching them, great strategies when it comes to feeling impulsive or aggressive. And a lot of times as educators, if a child struggles with reading, we put systems in place to teach that child how to read. Or if they're struggling in math, we put systems in place to teach that child, whether we pick them up, whether we work with them in small groups, whether we partner them with a buddy. But when it comes to discipline, there's like a different outlook on it. It's almost like, where's the dean? Where's the principal? Right? And so how do we put systems in place to teach them how to behave? How do we have those small group instructions or to teach them those strategies? Because once we teach them those strategies, how to channel that anger or how to deal with being impulsive, it helps them, it helps the other children in the classroom, and it helps us as educators, right? Because now we're able to do what we love, and that's teach. And so that's why education was near and dear to my heart. And it's something that, I'm going to retire in because I love it so much. And I'm just so glad to see all of you here, because that means that these children in New York City have a chance. And so what has helped me become successful in my work in education is 3 things that I'm going to give to you. And one of them is to know your students. Know your students in many different ways. Know your students academically, because then you know how you can really support them. Know your students socially, because if they need that social support, then that's the opportunity for you to be able to teach them how to behave socially appropriately. Right? Know your students personally. And this is near and dear to me because I had a student in 3rd grade, and when I came out of work, I actually saw the student at the gas station, and he was pumping gas. And so I wondered to myself, I said, why is his mom letting him pump gas, at such a young age in 3rd grade? But then a car gave him something and drove off. Then another car pulled up, and he started pumping the gas again. And so I went over to him and I said to him, Darren, why are you at the gas station pumping gas? And he said to me, because I'm trying to earn enough money so I can buy some bread and meat to make a sandwich for me and my mom. Right? That gave me a different perspective, because not only was he a behavior problem, but it helped me to understand that if he's hungry, it's hard for him to focus on what I'm teaching. Right? So that's what I mean by know your students personally, because then there are things that you can do as an educator to help them. The other thing is to know your colleagues, right? Because there's so much talent in our building, right? You might have someone who's great at art, in the arts, whether it's dance, whether it's drawing, and by knowing that, you can tap in on that resources to bring your curriculum to life for those students. Because in our classrooms, We have tactile learners, we have kinesthetic learners, we have visual learners, we have auditory learners, and every lesson should be able to tap into every modality so that we're reaching and teaching all children in our classrooms. And then the last one is near and dear to me, right? So sometimes as teachers, we're stressed, we're doing so many things because at the end of the day, everything is on us, right? And so sometimes we think that we can go into a classroom because we have the lesson up here and we know our students, and then we say, okay, I'm going to put this lesson together. But we can't wing it. So for a great lesson, we really need to plan. And so one of the things that I was raised on was 6 P's. Prior proper planning prevents poor performance. And I use that in every facet of my life. And so that's something that I feel would really help you all out in the classroom, because at the end of the day, you're all excellent teachers. And the children, like I said, they're blessed to have you. And so our job, right, is to learn from each other and to be there for each other so that we can be there for the children.